Imagine going to a restaurant and ordering pizza only for someone to bring out a burger. You tell the waiter this isn't what you ordered, so they then berate you for being a toxic customer and that you should eat your burger because it is pizza. Adapted from the prodigious body of work by the legendary Isaac Asimov, Foundation just aired its final episode of the second season. What we saw throughout the 10 episodes was yet more departure from the books. Extreme departure. The question I have is how far from the books can it deviate and still, in good conscience, call itself Foundation? In my opinion, it's long past. Let's dive in. Just to warn you guys, there are spoilers ahead. If Season 1 diverged too much from the books for your taste, you've probably been throwing stuff at the screen during Season 2, if you've been watching at all, that is. As I've talked about in other videos, I've always said Foundation for the small screen needed to do a few things differently from the books for a number of reasons, which I go into in depth in my previous videos, so I'll leave a link. It's this departure from the classic narrative which has been a bone of contention for die-hard Asimov fans. Although I believe there are elements that needed to change to successfully translate the Foundation story from books to TV, importantly, I've always said that whatever these changes are, they need to remain true to Asimov's vision, and if what we get is so wildly different, what makes it Foundation anymore other than in name only? With Season 1, I could see showrunner Goya's effort to bridge the two mediums. Season 2, however, I'm struggling to understand some of the decisions that have been made. I enjoyed Season 1 mostly as a standalone entity that, to be honest, I was able to separate in my mind from the original story. I still had issues with it, but it was entertaining on the whole. Season 2, however, let's just say I struggled with it a lot, especially the first half of the season. The second half picked up a lot, but I was really at the point where I was considering cutting my losses. So let's dive into the good, because there is good, the bad, and the downright confusing, and I'll tell you what I mean. Let's start with the good. The second season of Foundation unfolds with some positives that should be acknowledged. The casting for one, with Jared Harris and Lee Pace once again delivering memorable performances, as does Laura Burns-Demerzel, who for me stole the season with what turned out to be my most enjoyable story arc, peeking into her past and how she came to serve Empire. Needless to say, the visuals continue to be a high point, as does the Cleon arc, which is ironic because this was never part of Asimov's original story. The ambitious narrative around the Cleons takes an interesting story development with the introduction of Queen Sereth, the attempted political coup over Day, and Day's attempt to bring the genetic cloning dynasty to an end and to bear natural children to succeed him. Aside from the Cleons, I found I was most enjoying the season when it focused on the events that felt more in line with the book, mostly in episode 4, where the stars are scattered thinly. In this episode, we saw Bel Riose and Glorwyn Kerr investigate whether the Foundation is a threat to the Empire. Side note, I didn't realise till the end of this episode that Gale, Harry and Salvor were omitted entirely from the episode, and in my opinion it was better. That was when I realised there was a problem here, but I'll get into that later. Back to the good. I'm glad that for the most part they attempted at least to treat the Empire with the complexity it deserves. While the show's messaging certainly sways to the side of Empire equals bad, it acknowledges the chaos that will occur if Empire falls. This leads to a decent amount of agency from the character Bel Riose around this. He has personal reasons to hate the Empire, but he knows the cost and chaos that will occur if it falls, so he defends it. I found I enjoyed the second half of the season far much more than the first, for reasons I'll go into soon. It's in episode 9, long ago but not far away, that we got a glimpse into Demerzel's past. This is what I was waiting for the entire season, and I hope we get more exploration of Demerzel's character in season 3, assuming we get one. Episode 9 was by far my favourite, possibly including season 1 too, though it still had its flaws. There's a nod to Asimov's 3 laws of robotics, we see Demerzel's programming and how she came to serve Empire, we understand her motivations and the reason why she initiated the intimate relationship with Day, which I was not a fan of by the way, but became plausible once it was explained that she was attempting to rectify a mistake in his education. It was a good episode that patched up a lot of the issues that I had with the season until then. The finale tied everything together in a way I didn't really hate, and the writers attempted a few book-style twist reveals, such as Harry not being dead, which to be honest I groaned at, and I'll get into that, and Gale being in on the plan. Elsewhere, Belriose switches places with Day after being flushed out the airlock, using a piece of tech that was given enough good foreshadowing throughout the season so that it felt satisfying and plausible. Setting us up for Season 3, we discover Demoiselle somehow has the Prime Radiant. Gale and Harry take to their cryosleep pods, and the Mentalics will presumably become the second Foundation? This part is still fuzzy for me. We also get a glimpse into Season 3, 152 years later, to the Mule, who says he has to destroy who we assume is Gale. Oh yeah, and Salvor died. Maybe. While the season boasts numerous strengths, and there's a lot of good there, it has more than its fair share of problems, so let's get into them. Unfortunately, the season has many problematic elements, starting with the debatable decision to bring Harry back to life, if that's what really even happened, because it was never explained. A move that I believe contradicts the very essence of Asimov's writings. The choice to bring him back as a main character rather than as the Selden ghost not only disrupts the continuity of psychohistory, but also dilutes the gravity of death in the narrative, a theme that also occurs later when Harry dies again, but it's revealed in the last episode that he actually didn't die at all. Elsewhere, we have lots of other fake deaths that do nothing but lessen the stakes for our characters, because never at any point did I think that anyone was in any real danger. As well as Harry dying and popping up again, Belriose's husband, Glorwyn Kerr, dies and comes back. Brother Constance's father is stabbed by Day and comes back, and Claric is also back again. In fact, the whole Foundation on Terminus is destroyed by Day, crashing a ship into the surface, and, yep, you guessed it, not a single one of them dies because Selden's ghost somehow manages to save them all by sheltering them in the vault, which is now also a giant ship. In the show, death apparently means very little, so when it came to Salvor's possible death at the end of Season 2, aside from the fact I couldn't muster up enough energy to really care, I wasn't and am still not sure that she'll remain dead. Another reason I suspect this is because a lot of effort was spent in Season 1 getting her into Season 2, and it felt as though the story arc around her and Gale's relationship didn't get a conclusion. Either this arc isn't done, or it was bad writing. As a whole, the season suffers from pacing issues. The show takes its time setting up the story, and it was a bit of a slog to get through at times. This is especially true in the first half of the season. I'm all for long-form storytelling, and I can keep multiple storylines straight in my head, but this was verging into Rings of Power territory, and that it was just plain boring at times. You can set up a story arc that spans multiple episodes and seasons, and also create self-contained stories within these that have things like setup and payoff, so that each and every episode feels full and satisfying. It can be done. Before every TV show wanted to be Game of Thrones, back in the 90s and noughties, writers were the best at doing this. They knew their craft well. Look at Star Trek, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and countless others for real examples. The most glaring issue I had with the show is the handling of the Gale, Salvor, Harry arc, which failed to resonate on a human level despite occupying a considerable portion of screen time. There's a lot of setup for what I'm guessing is due to have payoff in Season 3, while the crisis at hand concerning Hober Mallow is given just minutes of screen time in some episodes. In Episode 4, the Gale, Salvor, Harry arc didn't appear at all, and I enjoyed the episode noticeably more. I found this arc bogged down the show with a lot of needless cut and paste writing, filled with explosions, exposition, and cardboard dialogue. What's ironic is that Goya wanted these characters to recur throughout the seasons to tie the story together across the timeline and draw us into their experiences and trials. But then they, firstly, give them no impact on the main story arc, the second Selden crisis, and then don't do the thing which they said they wanted to do, which was explore the human side of their characters. We're supposed to take the awkward interactions between Gale and Salvor as the building of a relationship, when all they do is blurt exposition at each other and come to the correct conclusions about something seemingly from nowhere. Having your characters realise stuff with no catalyst or process is bad writing. The discovery that Demoiselle serves only the first Cleon is made by Brother Dawn, but he seems to come to this discovery out of nowhere. He's just like, what if Demoiselle serves only the first Cleon? Overall, they've taken a story that was supposed to be about how intelligence and rationale win over violence and brute force, and from what I can see, they're turning it into a Chosen One story, where Gale will defeat the evil Empire Darth Voldemort and become all-powerful to overcome the Mule. So that was the bulk of what made up the bad. There is more, but I don't want to get ranty. So, on to the confusing. While aiming to be TV friendly, the show seems to miss the mark in adequately developing its main protagonists, Gale and Salvor. Their interactions and character development feel half-baked, and they don't explore any relationship dynamics. This is one of the things that confuses me most. One of the reasons we were told the TV adaptation would diverge from the source material was to make it more TV friendly and explore characters in a way that, admittedly, Asimov did not. In some areas we're getting under the skin of characters, like with Empire, and even with Bel Rio's getting a backstory, setting up a character we could potentially come to care about. The issue I have is that the story has failed its two main protagonists, Gale and Salvor. Where were the elements that made us care about their relationship, or even them as characters? The fact is, I didn't care what they did or what happened to them because I don't know who they are as people. What were their hopes? What were their fears? I just didn't know. So for me, we're missing some major character development, which, like I said, is confusing because that's the reason these characters exist as they do, rather than how they're presented in the books. This isn't helped by the fact the writers have them leap from crisis to crisis without actually taking the time to include some moments where they have the opportunity to interact on a personal level. This is one of the drawbacks from having a 10-episode season of hour-long episodes instead of 20-something 45-minute episodes from traditional TV shows that aired across seasons. There's little room for these moments. Instead, writers have to cram as much story into the episodes as possible without allowing time to breathe, react, and have their characters grow. It also confuses me that I can't help but find one of the most interesting elements of the show is the Empire subplot, which actually isn't even in the books. One, it's interesting, and two, I can see Asimov's themes in this. I think the writers need to start grounding themselves in the themes of the source material more. Yes, make it TV friendly, but understand the books and try to do them justice. However much there are interesting parts to this show, like the Cleons and Demoiselle, I don't think we're getting what we could be getting. I also had some continuity confusions. Apparently, no one knew Demoiselle was a robot. Queen Sereth seems to discover this as if it was some great secret. I understand this in the context of the robot war and that she's the only one left. I actually liked that. But what's confusing is, if no one knew Demoiselle was a robot, why didn't anyone question how she'd lived so long? Like, forever long. Hober Mallow's motives also confused me. I thought he started strong, but his character went from rebel trader to Harry Seldon convert without any development or reason. He went from A to C without passing through the important B. Elsewhere, Gale's powers are now apparently just a plot device, so all the characters can get out of their fixes. The Spaces handing Hober Mallow to Empire was a ruse, because everything was a ruse in episode 10, which without foreshadowing felt lazy. Suddenly everyone only does what Demoiselle says and not the Cleons for reasons, and apparently Sereth is pregnant. But when did Dawn undergo the procedure to reverse the sterility? It was mentioned earlier in the season that Day said he had to undergo this reversal before being able to have a child. Okay, last confusing thing before I sum up. How can the writers have characters throw around the phrase, violence is the last refuge of the incompetent? One of the core themes of the books, yet at every opportunity display the exact opposite. Foundation's second season is a mixed bag, offering moments of interest, good world building juxtaposed with narrative choices that left me baffled. If we get a season 3, which I think we will, the story would benefit from a tighter narrative that stays truer to the source material, while taking the time to explore character motives. The question remains for me, what does this show want to be? Who is it for? Is it for fans of the books? At this point, I don't think so. The decisions make me think otherwise, which is baffling when you have a ready-made audience. Imagine going to a restaurant and ordering pizza only for someone to bring out a burger. You tell the waiter this isn't what you ordered, so they then berate you for being a toxic customer and that you should eat your burger because it is pizza. At this point, I will continue with season 3, assuming it happens. Maybe I'll watch the first few episodes and see how they've diverged even more. Maybe Gale and Harry will open up a bakery called the Third Foundation, and the mule will be their comical assistant who's always trying to eat the pies. Okay, dibs on that concept. Anyway, thanks for listening. I'd love to know your thoughts on the Foundation series in the comments. What do you like about it? What do you hate? What makes you go, meh? Until next time, guys. Thanks so much for watching. If you're craving an extraordinary journey through realms unexplored, consider delving into universes directly out of my brain by checking out my sci-fi novels Black Milk and Delphine Descends. You can find more details in the description. Thanks for your support.